Go ahead. Cue clap for the sound. All right. So you're recording all those?
Yep, all rolling. Yep.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right.
Pachu is a name from El Paso. They originated it there, and I think it may have stemmed from the town Pachuca, but El Paso is where it was formulated into an example of a label for Mexicans who dressed differently, who spoke differently, who were Americans but not really, and they were like creating their own culture. And the Pachuco is the label they use, even though the suits they wore were Zoot suits, something developed by blacks in the 1930s. But they had their own style. It started in El Paso and it moved to other places of the Southwest, especially Los Angeles. And Los Angeles took it on as its own. It was, well, half of the population from Los Angeles had lived in El Paso. My family's from El Paso. So anyway, they were here after the experimental dress of in labeling of the Pachuco. Now, Pachuco then is the Mexican American. It's affected an urban, cool lifestyle, to put it in more colloquial words. Well, the one in LA, the Zoot riots from 1943, was preceded by the Sleepy Lagoon case in 1942, where the guys from a barrio near downtown Los Angeles, 38th Street, were involved in a gang fight and then a murder of an individual that was left at some area in Downey that had a little puddle, you know. They call it lagoon, but it was not a lagoon. It was a Mexican style of a lagoon, a puddle operating as a lagoon in order to create a romantic, a status. So in that area, this individual was killed, body was left there. The police came after not one individual that they could identify to be the culprit in terms of the murder, but they went after a whole body. There were 20 some odd guys from 38th Street. They were convicted, sent to jail. That was the kind of ball treatment. It didn't make any difference individually. The group should be labeled to be the murderers and put in jail. It created a groundswell of support from a lot of progressive people in Los Angeles and the media. Carrie McWilliams, author of North of Mexico and a number of other books, got very involved. He was a lawyer. Movie stars and Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, and others donated money to the organizations to resist that. And eventually, the legal challenges got these guys out of jail. But that was just the tip of the iceberg because the Zoot riots took place in 1943. And that's when all hell broke loose. The Mexicans, females, were tired of being fair game at American servicemen. They came into town, they saw Mexicans, they figured, well, they're Mexicans, they're hot blood, right? And they're loose. So they hit on them. And this was done quite often, including where the boyfriend was with the girls and the sailors and the other servicemen would hit on them and right under their noses, and they had three or four, five, half dozen sailors. So they figured they're not going to mess with us. We're the military. So they got into some fights, and some later it got wholesale where the servicemen came to LA in order to beat up on Mexicans, even though they said Zooters and Zooters and Pachucos. But it was a wholesale fight against Mexicans, just part of the racism that was underneath the surface and then just came out where everybody that was Mexican was beat up or mistreated. So in LA for a few days there, things got real bad until the leaders of the city got together and started putting pieces together to help stem that, uh, just like what's happening today with the protests and demonstrations. They're having the political leaders trying to figure out how to keep that from blowing up overboard and expanding. So the same thing for the Zoot riots of the 1840s, 1940s. Is that they set up new programs. I remember, in my case, the Catholic Church developed youth programs. CYO, Catholic Youth Organization, started boxing, athletic clubs, social clubs, and that was one way of dealing with the Mexican neighborhoods that were where you found zoot suiters and pachucos. This was an outlet for them. So for the late 40s and early 50s, that was a successful ploy on the part of the Catholic Church. That helped tremendously, sort of put a lid on any more other urban upheavals like the Zoot riots. Well, the war is something that occurred in the middle 19th century, the beginning of the U.S.'s expansion from the 13 colonies as they moved west. But it actually goes back centuries insofar as the indigenous population of Mexico and other parts of the Western Hemisphere. When the Spanish arrived and conquered them and defeated them, there were hundreds of years after a series of skirmishes and revolts and minor wars and struggles and resistance that was part of that Mexican Chicano history. So when you get to the mid 19th century, the United States, victorious over the British for its independence, and then resisting in 1812 a takeover of the British again, they were expanding. And the first president interested in expansion, of course, Thomas Jefferson, bought the Louisiana Purchase from from Spain, from the French actually, but because they had taken it away from Spain during the Napoleonic Wars. So the United States and Jefferson and other democratic leaders were interested in expansion. They were interested. They were motivated by manifest destiny, supposedly. That it was manifest. It was their destiny to move all the way to the Rocky Mountains and to the Pacific. So the United States offered money to Mexico. And when that didn't work, the United States took it away illegally and immorally. And there are countless books and articles dealing with this massive fraud. Fraud in the sense the United States had a war, invaded Mexico. There were 4 or 5 different military survive. I mean, what's the word? Military spots where they invaded in Mexico City through Veracruz, where they invaded Buena Vista, northern Mexico, where they invaded Ensenada and in Los Angeles. 4 or 5 in my book, From Indians to Chicanos. One of the pages there has the only map that I know of that puts together all the different military campaigns that were part of the invasion. And the United States initially offered to buy and purchase at a price, but then took it over. When Texas was annexed, the United States took Texas under its wing as part of the United States, and then had military patrols in southern Texas that went over the river, the Sabine River, that the United States said that was not the boundary. The boundary is the Rio Grande. So they went as far as the Rio Grande, and then they ran into Mexican troops, got into a fight, and American troops were killed. Mexican troops were also killed, but the Mexican troops sent the message back to President Polk in Washington, D.C., that American blood was shed on American soil, which was like just newly American soil. But then there's still some contentions over whether the boundary line was the same river north of the Rio Grande or the Rio Grande, which is into Mexico. So the war itself was fought in 1846. It ended in 1848 with a treaty in February of 1848. The initial treaty agreed upon by Mexican and U.S. representatives had two clauses there, two articles. One on culture, that the culture of the people would be protected, their religion would be integrated, and their language and all the other cultural attributes that came with being Mexican would be respected in a way where they weren't put down or eliminated or considered illegal to practice among the native Mexican population. And the other article was on land, that the land owned by the Mexican people, the land grants and all the other properties that were theirs and been developed by them, would be respected and included in the property rights of any other American that was part of the country. But the United States didn't fight a war to give away everything a war grants you. So they said they didn't want to admit to those two articles. They never signed them into the final treaty. They eliminated them. So Mexican culture, language, religion desecrated. Mexican land and property ignored. And in fact, anybody who had treaties or land grants or anything under the Spanish and Mexican governments was forced to have it processed by American land grant organizations. And of course, they didn't pass on most